Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Ipswich, brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only place to find daily content on every single Premier League club, Premier League wrap-ups in multiple languages, and all your women's football news as well. We're going to start today's episode with a little bit of an apology for the lack of episodes this week. Unfortunately, due to illness, work commitments, all sorts of things, we've had a severe lack of manpower this week. So we have had to miss a couple of episodes, but we are back today, and then we've got two of us here. We've got myself, Rob Binns, and I'm joined by the man who has recently overcome a bout of the flu to join me today, Richard Popple. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm on the mend. Good to be back.
Yeah, nice to have you back as well. Like I say, we're slowly getting the numbers back after a nightmare week that always seems to happen. How many times are all of us free in a week, and then suddenly once one person starts being knocked out of place for a week, everybody starts dropping like flies. It's just the way it works. But we should be back now, and like I say, we've got two of us out today, and we're going to do a preview for the game with Nottingham Forest at the weekend. That will be the plan for today's episode. Obviously, a team we know very well, haven't met each other at time of recording about 10 days ago in the FA Cup, so a lot bit more recent experience to refer to than we have on a lot of games in the Premier League. But so hopefully that sets us up to where the game goes. We'll say all the usual stuff. We'll discuss the team news because there's been some since we've last been with you. There has been a big bit of news regarding injuries that we'll cover. We'll chat about the game itself, and we're going to start off. We're going to link back to that cup game, Richard, because you have to expect two very different teams to what we saw in that cup game. But is that an example that we can match Forest in a game there? Because obviously we're faring very differently in terms of our seasons. A lot of people probably would have put us fairly close together in the table at the start of the year, but we couldn't be much further apart. But we competed well with them for 120 minutes. So admittedly, like I say, it was a very different 11 there. But does that give you hope coming into this league game?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think also I think you and I did the preview for that game, and also the hope is from the game we had in the league where we only lost 1-0 at the City Ground earlier in the season. It was a really tight game. They managed to get a bit of a dodgy penalty and stuff. So I think both games between the teams, I mean, that cup game, that feels like it's absolutely ages ago. It's only like 10 days ago. It really does feel like a long time ago, but yeah, it was a fairly even game, and as you say, like they are going to be different teams. The side we obviously played against, Palace, at the weekend, is probably going to be closer to the side that we see again. But yeah, maybe there are arguments for one or two others coming back in. I'm not too sure, but yeah, they've both been really tight games between the clubs this season, despite who's been on the pitch in terms of like personnel.
Yeah, definitely. So it's about seven or eight different players when you compare the 11 that we took to City Ground in the league and the 11 that we took there in the FA Cup, and both teams battled incredibly well. And so penalties were the story of the day on both occasions. One time, obviously, one in the 90 minutes, and the other time a shootout. But I said it in the aftermath of that game that we've sort of been one of the few teams that Forest struggle against, even though obviously they have beaten us both times, but at the end of the day. But you look how sort of comfortable they can be in games. Like they're a team that can have a lot of possession and control the game, but they're also just as comfortable sort of sitting back, which is and hitting on the break, which is what they tried to do against us. Which, so as we saw against United, is part of a problem for us that we don't really know what to do in that case. But you look at their game, obviously. Huge game for when weekend just gone, beating Man City to basically put them. If they lost that game, everyone would have been expecting the wheels to come off because City would have overtaken them, and then you thought, they won't get back in the top four now. It's all going to fall apart. But well and truly in their own hands now after that game. So, and that showed that they can sit back. They had barely any possession in that game. They got the job done. That they're a very confident team, but for some reason, things just don't seem to click when they play us. Which is obviously brilliant for us. I don't know why that is, really, unless it's because our systems are near enough match. Because we also, particularly away from home, like to sit in and ping on the break. We played the same formation. I don't know whether that's part of it or what, but they never seem to click fully into gear when they play Ipswich, which offers us a bit of an opportunity there. You'd think so. I mean, that's displayed by the fact that we put 2 different 11s out and battled them well that in both games as well. That there's something about us that they don't like, and I don't know what it is, but I'm hoping it's there again on Saturday because we really do need a result. But it's a tough one.
It's last chance saloon time, isn't it? I think I wasn't around at the weekend, obviously, to kind of like comment on the Palace game and stuff. But yeah, we've got 10 games to go. I think if we don't win on Saturday, then it's basically game over. So we are in must-win territory at this point. And you're right, maybe a side that has showed that they've not kind of been as comfortable playing against us as maybe you would have expected presents an opportunity. That being said, we are going to have to be on the front foot at the weekend, and that plays into Forest hands, obviously, with giving up possession and all the rest of it. Whether we can actually dominate possession, I'm not entirely sure. We just haven't all season, so maybe it'll be a bit more of an even game in terms of possession and stuff. But I think the one thing you could say about Forest is like they had a little bit of dip in form. Really, they had a terrible result at Bournemouth. They got smashed at Bournemouth 5-0. They obviously then recovered against Brighton ridiculously. I think they beat them 7-0 at home or something like that. They obviously won a couple of rounds of the FA Cup, including ourselves, on penalties. But they also lost to Fulham and Newcastle directly after the fourth round of the Cup as well. So they lost a couple of games. And then their last 2 Premier League games, they've kept clean sheets against Arsenal and Man City. So that kind of goes to show how strong they are. I think defensively, for the most part, they obviously have a bad game every now and then, but defensively, for the most part, they've been pretty solid this year. So yeah, they're going to be a tough kind of nut to crack, I think, and obviously allied to the fact that they've got good threats on the break and stuff, makes it really difficult. But isn't every Premier League game? Excuse me.
Yeah, very much so, and so certainly the City ground's been one of the toughest places to go for people over the course of this season. But so we've gave a good account of ourselves the 2 times we've been there, and now I say that I keep going for this argument. I keep going, now they've got to come to Portman Road, but we are rubbish at home. So I keep trying to spin it that way and say, home advantage, here we go. But we don't make the most of anything. We probably prefer playing away. But if there was a time for the home form to click into gear, it's now. If we just suddenly string a couple of wins in a row at home together, there's no better time to do it because it's getting, like you said, it's a now or never point now, isn't it? That I was fairly negative on Monday when I was reviewing the Palace game. That I've not changed my view on that point. I'm just trying to sugarcoat it a bit more for the sake of the podcast. I don't want to sit here and moan everything ahead. I moan after a game, but I don't want to moan ahead of a game. But certainly the odds are against us. But win your home games is always the number one thing you should do down the bottom. We haven't done it so far, but it might not be too late if we start doing that now. And it'll be interesting. You'd expect Forest to sort of sit back and play on the break, being the away side. But the big thing, I think, why they've struggled against us is that the wingers are so important how they play. And Alanga had a very good game, I thought, in the Cup. But Hudson-Odoi had a fairly quiet game in that one. And so both wingers were kept pretty quiet when we went there in the league as well. As only say one of the subs who came on in the end, it was who won the penalty, who ended up causing more of a threat. But the 2 main wingers who are the pace on the counter-attack, so Wood holds the ball up, releases one of them lot, they tend to have struggled against Town. And so particularly I look at that FA Cup game and we've only had one of our first choice fullbacks actually in each game because Twanzebe would have been injured for the first one as well. That we played one of our backup fullbacks in each game, and yet they've never really got to grips with the game. Either of the Forest wingers have both sort of struggled, and that is the key element of their attack, and maybe that is part of the reason why they've struggled. But certainly that's the first thing we've got to do right, isn't it? We've got to keep those 2 quiet out wide.
Yeah, absolutely. They've been a threat all year. Morgan Gibbs-White is a really, really good player as well. Like he's been excellent for them this year. He certainly was at the start of the year. Maybe he's faded a little bit, but he's still like the quality player I think in their team that really makes them tick and stuff. But I think all round there's kind of threats all over the pitch really. Well, I mean, I suppose the wingers are the main one, and obviously Chris Wood's having the season of his life. But I just think Murillo is such an effective player for them, like bursting forward and having a defender popping out into midfield and stuff, and they kind of like overman you in there because they're pretty powerful in there and stuff. So yeah, that they are having an incredible season, and this weekend aside, I really hope they finish in the top 4 or top 5 or whatever it is to get in the Champions League. 'Cause I think it's a great story, and they're a really historic club, Forest, and really nice club. But yeah, it will be interesting. It's just really difficult to feel positive or optimistic, should I say, about our home form. I mean, I think when all's said and done at the end of the year, there'll be a bit of a post-mortem into the season or whatever, and there will be a look at the fact that we have won one game at home all year, and it comes down to, we've got 5 games left at home. I think one of them is against, let me just bring up the fixture list, one of them against Arsenal. I think everybody else is very beatable, including, I would put Forest in there, I think Brentford are another one, and Wolves obviously as well as a massive, massive game. But if you did pick this win up this week, Wolves lost their game, then it's 3 points, right? And then it's that massive, massive 6-pointer, the one against Wolves in a few weeks' time. So this is, as I said earlier, it's now or never. And whilst Forest are brilliant and they're having a fantastic season and have a lot of threats, it does represent an opportunity, I think, because of what you said about us, the way we've performed against them this season.
Yeah, definitely. But we're gonna pause there. We're gonna have a quick word from one of our sponsors, and then when we come back, we're going to be looking at the form coming into this game because it could not be much further apart.
Your body is unique, and Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bioniq, the world's most personalised supplements. Bioniq provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bioniq. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now.
And we are back for the second part of today's show. So it's not going to be a fun conversation, this one, I'm afraid, Rich, but it's one we've got to have. We've got to look at the form table as we come into the weekend, because as you can tell by where we are on the table, so the difference of third bottom compared to third, we've had very different campaign. Certainly in what's been a season of struggle anyway, we're coming in on a poor run of form compared to Forest, where we spoke about some of the results they picked up recently. So let's talk about ourselves first. That we had that really tough run of games, didn't we, to start the year. We battled through, got a few points there, some in games that we wouldn't have expected to. And then that all concluded with Southampton, which was supposed to be the big 3 points to kick us on for the next run of games. That one's passed by, and now we're looking back at the recent games. I mean, Spurs at home, yeah, they are doing very well now. It's a harder game than it would have been a month prior, but that felt winnable. Man United at Old Trafford felt winnable. Palace, again, doing very well, a much harder game than it could have been if it played at a different point in the season, but still felt like you could go and get a result there. And we've come out of those 3 games with 0 points in a crucial time of the season, really. That is, how big of a concern is that? Because you could argue every game left could go in that category, because the cliche is you should hate playing teams down the bottom late in the season because they will scrap for everything. So the games we're having games where there's maybe not expectation, but certainly you look at it and think there's a chance here to go and get a positive result on the board. So how big of a concern is it that we're not?
Yeah, it's massive, isn't it? I mean, I think we've lost 7 of the last 9. We've taken 2 points in that time. We obviously haven't won since Chelsea, which was at the end of last year. So yeah, I think the form table, we are actually 18th in the form table, which shows you how bad Leicester and Southampton are. So we are where we are in the league in the last kind of 10 games worth of form, really. Forest, on the other hand, are slightly lower than that. I think they're like 7th or 8th in the table for the last 10 games. So they're slightly punching above where they were, which on the balance of play, maybe they are probably about the 6th or 7th best team in the league, realistically. But, obviously they had such an amazing start to the season that they just accumulated a lot of points. They may well be caught before the end. You don't really know. But yeah, it is a massive concern. I mean, we've all talked about it to death. We've let really bad games go at home. The Southampton one obviously sticks out, but you could argue Everton, you could argue Leicester, Palace, Everton. Yeah, all of these games at the start of the season where you were like, oh, we really needed to win those games. I don't think anyone foresaw us having this poorer home form. And yeah, that ultimately seems to be the undoing. But you're right to highlight the last 3 games. Spurs, I think we did catch them at a bit of a bad time. They just turned the corner fractionally, even though they seem to have kind of turned the corner again in classic Spurs fashion. The Man United game was kind of ridiculous. I don't know why we conceded 3 set-piece goals to Man United, who just look appalling to me every time I see them, but somehow they seem to get results somehow every now and then. And then the Palace one was a tight game, wasn't it? That just didn't go our way. And you could argue there's been 5 or 6 of those this season, including Forest away, where we haven't quite maybe got what we deserve out of a game, or it could have just gone our way where we'd have picked up a few more points here or there. But the facts are what they are. We've got 17 points. It's a really low amount for this time of the season, and it's going to take something miraculous to get us out of it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you said it right at the start there. We haven't won in the league since Chelsea. We are the only team in the Premier League without a league win in 2025. And that includes the teams we keep looking at saying how poor are they? If we're not very good, how poor must they be? They've won more games than us since the turn of the year. Obviously, Southampton's one win coming against us as well.
Yeah.
It's a huge concern that it's almost, I don't know whether it's more concerning that we are competing in these games or whether you sort of feel like if you're losing this many games, you almost sort of need to be being outplayed, but we're not in a lot of games.
Yeah.
We just haven't got the quality, which is frustrating. I mean, I said it on Monday that it's a conversation we've had loads of times, but while that game was 0-0, you're sort of holding out your hope that we were going to nick one and get in front. But once the clock turned sort of 70, 75, it became about hanging on for 0-0, didn't it? Because we're not going to compete at that point. Once we start making the subs and the key players have run their race because they work so hard and have to come off, that you sort of, once we get to that point every game, if we're not winning by sort of 75 minutes, then it becomes about protecting what we've got. And if we're losing by that time, you seem to give up the hope that we'll go and get something out of the game, which is obviously a big problem we spoke about all the time. But Palace was just the latest example of that. I don't know, unless you tend to be a bit more positive than me most of the time. Where do you sit on that? Were you sort of, was it about protecting a draw once we got late on in your eyes, or was there that hope there that we'd go and nab one?
I don't think we've got the skill set to hold on for the draws in the Premier League. I don't think we have the quality to be able to do it, unfortunately, and we certainly don't have the confidence right now to see out a game because we haven't done it. Nor did we really do it in the Championship. We talked about all this before, where we were kind of outgunning teams in the Championship, and coming from behind to win games and all that kind of stuff, and outscoring people. We're certainly not doing that this year. So you've got a bit of a perfect storm of being a little bit porous at the back. I don't think we've been terrible defensively, but I think we've been average at times where teams have kind of like cut through us, and there have been poor days, obviously, but you're going to get that in the Premier League. But I think overall there's been probably 20 out of the 28 games where we've been kind of fine defensively, but we've just been really lacking going forward. And you're right to point out that we've all said the sort of 70-minute mark when Kiyuste's going off the pitch and Delap's knackered and the forwards are a bit toothless because they can't hold on to the ball and the combinations aren't really working. We just don't look like we're a threat at that point. And I think with Palace, I think we had 15 shots in that game or something. That's quite a lot. And that's a lot for us away from home for sure. So we were carrying some kind of threat going forward, but obviously the lack of, clinical finishing, which has maybe hurt us all year. Delap maybe has dried up a little bit in the last few weeks, which you can't really blame him for. I think that was probably inevitable at some point. And the goal threats aren't really coming from anywhere else consistently. You know, people get the odd goal, but it's not really consistent. And Cisso's not really had that impact and has been in and out with injuries. So it's just a perfect storm of stuff, isn't it, really? And it is a concern, but it's been a concern all year. And I think I actually listened to somebody who was talking about it the other day where they were being really critical of Ipswich in terms of like the recruitment last year. And it was real Harry hindsight kind of stuff, saying, you know, they've bought for the championship and they've bought championship players and all this kind of stuff. And I don't think anyone at the start of the season really thought that. You know, we drew 4 of the first 6 games and we were looking really competitive. And, you know, we were hoping we would go on and find that efficiency in front of goal, and it's just not happened, unfortunately. So, and now the draws have turned into defeats more often than not. So you just, you know, that downward kind of feeling kind of takes over a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's the quality issue, isn't it? I mean, if you look at the league table there, the reason why the 3 promoted teams are down where they are is because of a lack of quality in the squad. I mean, most people's squads down the bottom, on the whole, aren't very good, and that's why they're down where they are. But if you look at we're 18, you look at 17 Wolves. They've got Mateus Cunha who can win games on his own. 16, you've got West Ham. We've got Jarrod Bowen who can win games on his own, and then they've got players like Mohamed Kudus and Lucas Paqueta in there as well. And so Wolves have got the likes of João Gomez and people like that. That we've got. You'd probably put Delap in that category for us. Davis when he's on form, but that's pretty much it. And it's the same with Leicester and Southampton, that in that category of sort of would get poached by a higher club, as particularly if they go down. The teams above us who are holding that gap have a lot more players in that category, and that, which is why the drop off is where it is, and that is naturally a money thing. It's been again something else that's come up a lot over the course of the season about that gap getting bigger and bigger every year between the Premier League and the Championship, and we have spent a lot of money, but don't get me wrong, but still, like that gap is evidently there, and it's going to be an ongoing trend. I think we're going to see, because I look at the Championship now, and there's a few teams in there that probably do better than Southampton, but do they have more points than where us and Leicester are at this point? I can't confidently say they do.
No,
which is a bigger problem for a discussion on probably a separate podcast with a few Championship fans and a few of us lot as well. That'll probably be a good listen at that point. Maybe we'll pitch that one on the GSPN network before the season's out. But that closes up on part 2. We'll be coming back for the final part of the show. We'll be discussing team news after this short message. Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform, and Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. And we are back for the final part of today's show. So let's start with Ipswich again. We're going to run through the team news we know about, and obviously the big story that's broke Monday night, I think it was, or either way, since the last time we brought an episode to you this week, is that someone we've been learning to live without in recent weeks, Sammy Szmodics, has his season looks like it's going to be over. The club have decided that the best thing for him with his ongoing ankle injury is to just have surgery now and make sure he gets a full pre-season and look ahead towards next year. He's been fighting it here and there. He came back for one game and went off injured again straight away. That it's clearly something isn't right there, and the decision has been made now that he will go and have surgery rather than try and fight his way fit for the run-in. Highly unlikely he's back for the rest of the season. He might just about scrape in there the last game or two if he has a stupidly quick recovery, but who knows what the league table will be looking like at that point by then. But that's the big news coming out. Obviously, we're still, as usual with Ipswich, we don't get many updates about the other injuries. Obviously, we're missing Twanzebe at Palace last week because the knock he picked up against Forest. Don't see too much of an update on that front. I don't think it's meant to be that long term, but like I say, the club won't give us anything in the build-up to the game. He could be on the team sheet, he could not be. But in terms of the 11 we put out, Rich, compare it to that 11 we saw at Palace. Obviously, the other name missing from that 11 was Hutchinson, who was dropped to the bench, with Enciso coming back, who I thought actually had quite a good game. What changes were you sort of expecting to see from that Palace 11? Because obviously Enciso and Phillips was the other one who came back in that game. So, Smodics aside, the injuries are starting to come back at a good time.
Yeah. Well, Morsey didn't go off the bench that game either, did he?
No. Probably due to the fact he played 120 on the Monday.
Yeah. But arguably had his best game in quite a while in that Forest game. Yeah, for the most part. Maybe in the second half anyway. He might come back into it, I would think, potentially. Maybe not, because it's they've had a whole week, but Morsey, I would imagine, might come back into it. Yeah, I don't know. Will Tuanzebe be coming back from suspension?
I think he's back already. I think.
Is he?
Yeah, I think he
So
only had one gamer because it was 2 bookings.
Oh right. So is he injured?
Yeah, he went off at half time against Forest, didn't he?
Oh, of course he did. Yeah. So we don't. Yes, you're right. So yes, we don't know the full extent of that. Yeah, because O'Shea was at right back, of course, against Palace. So yeah, I mean that back four, I would imagine will probably stay the same. To be honest, with Greaves and Wolfenden in the middle. So yeah, aside from Morsey, maybe Hutchinson, but I kind of agree with you. I think Enciso actually played quite well. Maybe Hutchinson comes back in for Philogene, who was okay. Yeah, and Hutchinson and Morsey, I would say, would be the two to come back in. I'm not entirely sure if Jack Clark gets a start either again, so maybe Broadhead for him. But I've been advocating for that all year. So I could see maybe 2 or 3 changes, which is kind of what he does in most games anyway. To be honest, is change it up a little bit in that way. But yeah, it won't be anything too radical, I wouldn't have thought.
You've gone a very bold prediction there, saying that we're going to line up with the same defence 2 games in a row. I don't know if that's happened all season.
That's true. Well, who would it be?
I don't know. I imagine it would be either it be a 5 with Johnson in there again, or it'd just be like, just for the sake of making a change, like it feels like most weeks, it's going to be probably Burgess would come in for Wolfenden or Greaves. He likes to throw one change in there every week, pretty much. But
yeah,
I like to think we keep the same 4, but I don't know if we've done that all season. So it's a bit of a bold shout for us to try and say that would be the case.
I think it will be because didn't Burgess come off at half-time as well against Forest?
Yeah, he was back on the bench at Palace though, so he obviously is somewhat fit to make the journey.
He's somewhat fit,
especially with McKenna. McKenna doesn't like putting centre backs on the bench, so if he was on the bench, he obviously had a reason to put him there.
No, I mean, what else can you do? They're ingrained with this kind of one up front business. I'd love to see Hurst up there with Delap. I'd love it. I think it'd be really. It really could be a catastrophe. It might not work at all. But aren't we at the point in the season where we might have to try something a little bit more, direct potentially, and getting a couple of big boys up there and just really running it for us and really chucking it in the channels and going for it a little bit. Because our tricky wingers, I think when all is said and done, I think that's been the most disappointing part of our season, to be perfectly honest, because we invested so much money in that area of the pitch, and it doesn't really, at this stage, these guys are all young, they're all very good players, and I'm sure they will develop or whatever. But at this stage, they've not had the impact that we were hoping for. And yeah, like I say, we spent so much cash in that area of the pitch, it's not kind of worked out, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a big problem area for us this year. I mean, how much did we spend? How much quality is there when you look at it on paper? You look at the forward options, but then combine them all together. Have they even scraped 10 goals yet between them all? Maybe just with Philogene's brace at United the other day. And even that chunk is all Smodics, really, isn't it? Apart from a couple for Hutchinson and a couple for Philogene, which happened last week. In that case, so Clark hasn't had the goal threat. He's looked bright in spurts. Broadhead played very well, but hasn't been able to turn that into a scoring touch. We've had injuries out there as well. Some people, like the likes of Burns and Ogbene, obviously Ogbene especially, look really sharp. Smodics now is an out for the season one as well. Obviously, sounds worse than it is in a lot of cases when you say out for the season now, because there frankly isn't long left to go, only a couple of months. That I don't know. There's so much quality there on paper I can't say with confidence they've got 10 goals combined in the league. Compare that to
I
obviously
wouldn't have
having to
thought
lap up
so.
front.
Clark hasn't scored in the league, has he?
I don't think so.
Hutchinson's got like 2 or 3. Schmodix has got 3 or 4, maybe. Philigine's got a couple of goals. Yeah, so maybe about 10, maybe. But and Philigine's not obviously been there for that long. Yeah, it's just it just hasn't. I don't know. I think we've all kind of questioned, why are we buying so many, 5'7" tricky wingers? Yeah, I mean, Ogbene obviously was the one that had a different profile. He obviously gets injured right at the start of the season, which is a bad bit of luck and stuff. I think he probably would have played quite a bit actually, because I think he was strong and he was direct and could defensively hold himself up as well. But yeah, it's just not quite worked. And I think McKenna has, like in his defence, really, like in the whole team, if I'm honest, not really found the combinations that he has been comfortable with playing week in, week out, even in midfield, and that too, that's changed constantly. Who's coming in and out of there, even though we've had a lack of personnel. So it's kind of been the story of the season. But in a long-winded answer to your question, there will be 2 or 3 changes, I'm sure, because there kind of always is.
Yeah, and then on the complete opposite of the spectrum, really, is how Nuno sets Forest up. He likes to keep the majority of his 11 together. I mean, I'll look at the 11 that started that Man City game. So Sells, Aina, Milenkovic, Murillo, Williams never changes unless there's an injury or someone needs a rest. And same at the other end, Wood up front, Hudson-Odoi gives White Alanga behind is going to be the front four that's going to play against us. You'd have to expect. It's just those midfield two that occasionally rotate around. That's like when it was Anderson and Dominguez against City. It's Anderson will probably play, and then it's just that other midfield role is potentially the only difference to how they lined up last week. So we know what you get with Forest, but knowing how to play against is the tough bit, because they don't make loads of changes. So your analysts are able to get a lot of information out of them, but it's very hard. They're very hard to play against, because you can say that about everybody, that you can sort of know what's coming because you see them, especially this late stage in the season. But nobody seems to have a way to stop it really at the moment. But we seem to be able to frustrate them. That obviously there's a lot of quality there. We have to expect most of the same 11. So do you think Forest will change anything about their play? Really, not that they need to, I suppose.
No, it's worked for them all year. They're absolutely not going to change. And Nuno's never really changed as a manager, has he? He's kind of like always done his thing. And I think he's just like, they're good players, obviously, but they're also really quite big athletes. Like, they've got a lot of power and height and stuff in their team. You even think of like Sangare coming off the bench. Ryan Yates is very happy to put it about and is really effective. I'd love Ryan Yates in our team, actually. I really like Ryan Yates. Who's the striker that comes in for Wood sometimes?
Alani.
Yes, he had a great season. Was it last year, maybe, or a couple of years ago, where he had a really, really good season for them? They're just big, they're powerful, and obviously we know that later in games that tends to be a bit of an undoing for Ipswich. So that's obviously a concern. Like I say, I just hope we're not going to play Hurst and Delap together, but I really hope we just kind of really try and go for it and maybe do mix up that midfield combination a little bit, just to try and be a bit more direct. But as you say, and if we can go back to being sort of optimistic, we have made life a little bit difficult for Forest this season, and let's just hope that we can find a couple of early goals to really put them on the back foot.
Yeah, you'd hope so. And I'd say you'd like to see a bit more adventure, wouldn't you? Like to say whether that's two up front or something in there, but it's that balancing act, because we have nothing and everything to lose. Because you can argue this might as well change it up now. The gap's 6 points. Something needs to change, go down that road. But at the same time, 9 points and it's over. So if you go for something, get it wrong, Wolves win, then it doesn't matter that we've still got them to play to try and get 3 points back. 9 points will not be overturned. So you can't push it too far the other way, but certainly something needs to change. Because we've tried the same approach for 3 or 4 weeks now, and we've not played badly, but we haven't won the games. So even maybe a sacrifice, despite what I just said about letting a gap get to 9 points, you always have to try something against Forest as a trial game, knowing they're probably going to beat us anyway. And then you've got it in the locker ready for those more winnable games that you can go where maybe against weaker defences where something might work. You never know. But to wrap up the show, on your score prediction.
I was going to say, what I really miss, and this is before your time, Rob, is that at the end of the season, like a side at the bottom, before the transfer window, right? Because when it just used to be open for all the time, you could buy players whenever you want, but less transferred happen in a weird way. And clubs at the bottom would just buy a couple of players towards the end of the season, and that would keep them up. It would just completely change their season, like the last sort of 5 or 6 games or whatever. And that I kind of love that. I mean, you just don't really see it anymore because it's sort of like, and that goes back to the point of like, do we try stuff and get a little bit radical, and we can't be conservative and go to a back 5 again because it's just not really working for us. We don't really have the personnel for it. We don't have the power coming from our fullbacks. We don't have the midfield to be able to kind of like drive through other teams and all that kind of stuff. So that doesn't really work anymore. And our usual formation, we've just not found those combinations or whatever throughout the season, and we've just not been enough of a threat, unfortunately, and we haven't quite found the goals that we needed. So yeah, do you kind of just chuck a bit of a maverick in there and try and go for it? Who knows? I'd love to see it. Let's have them both up front together. Prediction, I don't know. Well, we need a win, so I'm going to predict a win. 2-0.
There you go. I like that. I like that mentality. We need to win, so I'm going to go for it. I think we need a win, but I think we're going to lose. I keep trying to put points and wins on the board in these predictions, and it's not working. So, I do think of the games we got less, this is probably one of the least likely that we go and get something. There's even an argument you put Arsenal ahead of this, although by the time we play them, they'll probably have Saka back and be back to their full attacking strength again. But I just can't see anything happening.
For anything, so they'll be winning games again because they won't be playing for anything.
Yeah, true. Although to be fair, the teams who've got nothing to play for is who you want to play at the late stages of the season. People should be more scared of teams like us and Leicester than they are of the likes of Brighton and that now who aren't going to play for anything. You never know, but I can't see this game as being one where we do get points on the board. I think this is going to be I think it'll be tight again, but I think they'll Forest probably nick it 1-0 because I think if they do score and then sit back a bit further, I don't see us breaking them down. And that's my concern with this game, is that what happened at the City Ground in the league will happen here, that at 1-0, Forest will just sit back that little bit deeper. And as we saw in that game, as we saw at United, we won't have an answer.
So, Rob, I think we need to win 5 games to stay up. Where do you think the 5 wins are coming from if we're not going to get one out of Forest?
I think, Wolves absolutely has to be. That's non-negotiable.
Because Bournemouth away is next, and they're pretty
that's
decent.
A tough one. So I'd say Wolves is a definite. Leicester's a definite. You've got to go and win both of those to have a chance. West Ham, as much as you wouldn't want it to go to the final day, West Ham at home on the final day, again, that argument of having nothing to play for by then, that's very winnable. I also think Brentford is. This is my concern, really, that all of the last 3 games to me, like especially because of, again, that cliche I keep going back to, you don't want to play. The later the season gets, the more horrible teams down the bottom should be to play. Those last 3 games could maybe not easily is probably the wrong word, the way we go about it, but when you're really scrapping for your life, those last 3 games could be 9 points. But the problem is the way it's going is that even we might be more than 9 points away by that game. That's why I think that's my issue, really, is that I think it's got to be those last 3, it's got to be Wolves, and then it's one fluke one, like Chelsea maybe. They seem to not like us the first time round. Again, how much have Arsenal got to play for by then, particularly when you factor in the Champions League as well? Because if they do you'd expect them to progress. Well, obviously, by the time this goes out, we'll know if they've progressed or not. But I'd hardly doubt PSV overturn a 7-1 deficit. And if they can beat one of the Madrid teams in a quarter-final, that must be around semi-final time. And who's going to care about Ipswich away when you're second and nothing to play for when you've got a Champions League semi-final coming up? So you never know. But yeah, I'd go Wolves the last 3 and one shock one that I can't decide what game to put it into.
I mean, if we win the last 3 games to stay up, that would be. I don't think there would be a better story in football than that. That would be literally insane. I think it would probably be better than the promotions. Oh, what a week or 2 that would be.
Thing is, I remember when the fixtures came through, I said the last 4, but unless Everton have fallen off a cliff by then, I think you can rule out going to Goodison and getting something at this point. But so the 3 after that, certainly. But so the issue is, it's already 6 points. It could very feasibly be 9 or higher in the next few weeks. And I'm looking at these games that I'm trying to pick where a shock win happens. That we could win those last 3 and still go down by a point because Wolves have picked one up in that time as well. So realistically,
I guess
next 2 are tough.
I guess Saturday
you
would
absolutely
be a
have
shock
to beat
win.
Wolves. Yeah, it would be for me.
No, I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, but so I'll be the boring -1 who puts us for a 1-0 defeat. You've gone the more hopeful 2-0 win that someone's got to do it. I've given up on that side of things. I'm glad you haven't, at least. So not dragging the podcast down with my negativity. But I hope you're right. But we will see. And of course, when we are reacting to the result next week, we will hopefully have a crossover for you for an episode tomorrow. Unfortunately, that's not guaranteed at the moment, but we will try our best to get that out to you. And if we do not, we'll catch you next week for the reaction to Forest, where, like I say, hopefully it's gone the way of Richard's prediction more so than mine. But we'll see you when hopefully tomorrow. But we'll see. Ultimately, we'll see you when we see you. And that is it for today's episode. Goodbye.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.